Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum. For those of you who are observing Ramadan, hope your fasting is going okay, and welcome to the last 10 days of Ramadan. We appreciate everyone giving us some time out of your day as the Council on American Islamic Relations releases our annual Civil Rights Report. We have 3 people here to speak to you today. My name is Corey Saylor. I am the Research and Advocacy Director and one of the co-authors on the report. Behind me is Nihad Awad, the Executive Director of CAIR, and on my other side is Farah Afifi. She is the other co-author on the report and the Research and Advocacy Coordinator. We'll do brief presentations and then we'll open up to questions. But I will tell you, as someone who has been doing this work for almost 30 years, this report has some items in it that surprised me and shocked me and lead us to some unfortunate conclusions about the state of Islamophobia in the United States. So I will turn it over to my colleague Nihad Awad for introductory remarks, and then we'll have Farah come and give you a presentation on the report.
Thank you, Corey. Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be to you. And thank you for coming for this press conference. First of all, I would like to acknowledge and thank our legal team, our lawyers, our legal staff, case workers, those who have been working very hard to protect the rights of American Muslims nationwide. And also for those who have reported their cases to CAIR and have entrusted CAIR with protecting and defending their civil rights and civil liberties. Special thanks to Corey Saylor and Farah Afifi for their amazing work for researching, analyzing, and producing this very, very important and unique report of its kind, and also their hard work of coordinating this effort with our offices nationwide. This is the culmination of a nationwide effort headed by Corey and Farah. To the details and overview of this important annual report. As you can see from the report itself, the title of this report is Fatal: The Resurgence of Anti-Muslim Hate, with the cover photo of an innocent young boy, Wadi' al-Fayoumi, who lost his life after being stabbed 26 times in his home by the landlord of his family in the suburb of Chicago in October. And his mother was stabbed about 12 times and she survived. Wadi' is the face of this report. There are many people who suffered different acts of discrimination and violence as a result of the resurgence of Islamophobia, anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian hate. My colleagues, this phenomenon has been skyrocketing in the past a few months. However, this specific report, we cite 8,061 cases, which is the largest number ever recorded by CAIR in the past 30 years, when we started recording and issuing civil rights report on the status of American Muslim civil rights in the United States. And that's very alarming. Half of these cases were reported to CAIR in the last 3 months of 2023. And this is an important phenomenon and dangerous one because it has been due to the well-orchestrated propaganda by Israeli officials, like the president of the State of Israel, who said that there are no innocents in Gaza. And his defense minister, who compared the Palestinians to human animals, and other cabinet members of the fascist Israeli government and members of the Knesset. There are plenty of clear statements of provocation, dehumanization of the Palestinians that followed the early days of October in Gaza and in the West Bank. Unfortunately, it did not stop there. It has been repeated, propagated by one of the most powerful people in the world, President Biden, when he repeated unverified Israeli talking points dehumanizing the Palestinians, when he said that he saw more than 40 beheaded children. There was no data, there was no picture, there was no evidence. President Biden, until now, has not apologized to Palestinians, to the nation, and to Muslims. The White House retracted that statement a few days later. Not on video, only a statement. I don't know how many people reported it. Not only that, the American media, the mainstream media, continued to repeat Israeli propaganda, talking points to dehumanize the Palestinians and Muslims. And the result is very obvious. An uptick in the anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian sentiment, acts of violence, discrimination against workers in their workplace, students in their schools, at their university campuses, being threatened by university officials and even governors of the state, such as Ron DeSantis, who asked university officials in Florida to shut down student groups who are exercising their First Amendment speech rights to criticize the state of Israel and to call for the end of the genocide in Palestine. These cases continue to rise, but our report covers 2023. Until now, while this genocide is being overseen by President Biden, by this administration, by our government, by the government who's taking our tax dollars and shipping Israel non-stop lethal weapons, lethal mass destruction weapons, such as 2,000-pound bombs, including just a recent shipment that the president has allowed to go. And this is the main reason for the continuation of Islamophobia, for violence, for anti-Muslim discrimination. And we, Mr. President, President Biden, we are not going to be fooled by your untimely attempt to dissuade or fool Muslims and the nation by announcing a special envoy for monitoring and combating Islamophobia. While that position we have been calling for more than 3 decades, the timing is suspicious, and we want you to stop. If you want to stop Islamophobia and the violence against American Muslims and the pro-Palestine movement in the world. If there's anyone in this world who can stop the genocide in Gaza, it is you. You can pick up the phone and you can call Benjamin Netanyahu, and Benjamin Netanyahu will have no choice but to stop the war, knowing that he cannot continue this genocide without your tacit approval and support. It is very obvious. And to my brothers and sisters who are planning to go to the White House, what are you doing? You are going to take a break fast while the Palestinians are starving by your own government? You can be more effective by not going to the White House, staying outside with us, and send a powerful message when President Biden sees that he has empty seats. That is a more effective message, and no meetings with the president until there is ceasefire. So no ceasefire, no meetings. Loud and clear For those who continue to go there, we wish you good luck, but don't break the consensus of the community. Our community showed a strong resolve in Michigan, in Georgia, in Minnesota, in Washington State, everywhere. Whenever the president shows up, he will be heckled, he will be interrupted. No, he does not live in a bubble. Some of us are living in a bubble. The president is desperate for your support as a community, and you continue to support our community is the best way of action. As I conclude, this Islamophobia phenomenon is unfortunately part of our life, and our government has a lot to do with it. One small example, and I'm sure my colleagues will cover this, is the watch list. The government, not only Republican government, but also democratic government. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, Islamophobia is non-partisan. Islamophobia is part of the mindset of our government in the way it looks and behaves and treats American Muslims. The government has a secret watch list that has almost 2 million people on it. And this watch list includes the no-fly list. American Muslims are treated practically as a second-class citizens, as a suspect community. We have been challenging legally this list all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court sends a loud and clear message that the behavior of the government is unconstitutional. So we will continue to push back. As I conclude, yes, this report focuses on the negative aspect of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim discrimination, but also we acknowledge, as my colleagues may say, that our community is also growing. Our community is being enfranchised by its own work and its own hard work. The community and its contributions have been recognized by several states. Eid holidays have been recognized in many schools. Many elected officials among the Muslim community who won their seats in the past 7 years are sending clear signal that they are public servants, and our community is a contributing community, vibrant community, loves its country, but we want our country to love it back in terms of equal treatment, dignified treatment, and as such. So I would like to stop it here. Again, I thank you for coming, and I thank my colleagues who have been working very hard to showcase these numbers, because these numbers have many human beings behind them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nihad. And now we'll dive into the report. The presentation takes about 10 minutes, and once Farah is done, then we'll open it up to questions in the room.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, everyone, for being here. As Corey stated, my name is Farah Afifi. I am the Research and Advocacy Coordinator at the Council on American Islamic Relations, and I'm also the co-author of CAIR's new 2024 Civil Rights Report, Fatal: The Resurgence of Anti-Muslim Hate. Today, I would like to take you through some of our key findings and recommendations and answer any questions you may have regarding the report. I'd first like to start off with a graphic from our report which demonstrates an analysis of the total number of complaints that CAIR receives on a year-by-year basis over the last several years. As you'll see in the graph, the number of complaints that CAIR receives generally increases over time, with an important exception in 2022 when we marked the first ever decline in the number of complaints received by CAIR offices. That decline, however, did not last for very long, as in 2023, we not only saw a 56% increase in the number of complaints reported to CAIR, but we also recorded the highest number of complaints ever reported to CAIR offices in our group's 30-year history. To delve deeper into the 2023 data, we received a total of 8,061 complaints from across the country. In terms of complaint breakdown, immigration and asylum cases continue to be the highest reported category to CAIR offices. Similarly, As in 2022, employment and education-related complaints are among the highest reported complaints to CAIR offices. However, I will note here, and I will discuss this in further depth into the presentation, we saw a significant increase in the number of employment and education-related complaints reported to our offices over the previous year. Lastly, I would like to note here that unlike 2022, hate crimes and hate incidents are now among the highest reported categories to CAIR offices, coming in at 607 complaints in 2023. To look at the 2023 data from a different angle, I'd also like to show you all a month-by-month analysis of the total number of complaints reported to CAIR offices. As you'll see in the graph, from January through September 2023, the total number of complaints reported to our offices remained relatively stable and steady, with an important exception in October, when we saw a significant spike in the total number of complaints reported to our offices, a spike that continued on throughout the rest of the year. October 2023, of course, marks the escalation of hostilities in Israel and Palestine, as well as the beginning of the latest round of violence from the Israeli government against Palestinian civilians in Gaza. In order to get a better understanding of what the 2023 data would have looked like had the events of October 2023 not occurred, we decided to compare the monthly average of complaints received in 2022 with the monthly average received just in those first 9 months in 2023, so the pre-October period. We found that in 2022, we received an average of 430 complaints per month. In 2023, again, just in those first 9 months, the pre-October period, we received 498 complaints per month. What we can conclude from this data is that pre-October 2023 would have likely seen a slight increase in the total number of complaints reported to CAIR offices. However, I would like to emphasize that this increase likely would have been incredibly slight and nothing like the actual spike that we did end up seeing, particularly in those final 3 months of the year. Now, I'd also like to discuss some of the key and unprecedented trends emerging from the 2023 data. In particular, we saw a significant increase in the number of everyday attacks on Muslims and American Muslim communities across the country. In 2022, we reported receiving 117 complaints of hate crimes and hate incidents. In 2023, that number rose by a staggering 419% to 607 complaints. I also want to highlight that 472 of those 607 complaints came just within the final 3 months of the year. This confirms what we have long known about 2023, particularly those final months, which is that everyday Muslims and American Muslim communities have had their safety threatened and have been under attack due to the Israeli government's continued violence against Palestinians in Gaza, as well as the United States' justification of that violence through Islamophobic and blatantly anti-Palestinian rhetoric. The next trends I'd also like to discuss are the increases that we have seen in employment and education-related complaints in 2023. As you'll see in a graph on the left, in an analysis between the number of employment discrimination complaints received in 2022 and 2023, we marked a 113% increase in the total number of employment discrimination complaints reported to CAIR offices. In a similar analysis of education-related complaints, and that includes both bullying as well as education discrimination at the K through 12 as well as at the university level, we noted a 219% increase in the total number of education-related complaints reported to CAIR offices during this period. This again confirms what we have known about 2023, again, those final 3 months, which is that employees and students had become targets for attack, not just by external organizations or individuals who sought to personally harass or dox them, but also by employers and universities themselves who sought to suppress speech in support of Palestinian human rights. This data is incredibly concerning for the state of American Muslim civil liberties and civil rights. However, I do want to highlight that our report also notes a number of successes throughout the year. In particular, I want to highlight the expansion of equal recognition of Muslim religious identity that we have seen throughout 2023. For example, we saw several cities, including Minneapolis and New York City, permit the adhan to be called over loudspeakers, which is the Muslim call to prayer. We've also seen a number of states adopt the practice of recognizing a Muslim American Heritage Month. That includes New Jersey and Georgia in 2023, as well as North Carolina in 2024, bringing that total up to at least 8 states across the country. Finally, we also noted that a number of school districts across at least 6 different states have added the observation of one of 2 major Muslim holidays to their yearly calendars. Before we conclude, I'd also like to highlight a number of recommendations emerging from our report. First and foremost, CAIR continues to call on the United States government to call for a permanent and immediate ceasefire in Gaza. As the data demonstrates, the Israeli government's campaign of violence against Palestinian civilians in Gaza, as well as the United States' justification of that violence through dehumanizing anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian rhetoric, has significantly threatened the lives of Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians, not just across this country, but across the world. The second key recommendation I'd like to highlight is our continued call for the Biden administration to suspend the dissemination of the FBI's federal watch list. In a special report we released last year from a 2019 version of the federal watch list, we found that over 98% of the names on the federal watch list were Muslim or Arabic sounding names. CAIR has continued to challenge this discriminatory and unconstitutional watch list, particularly through a lawsuit filed on behalf of plaintiffs who have faced negative repercussions due to current or past placement on the watch list. That, of course, includes Mayor Mohammed Khairullah of New Jersey, who was infamously revoked entry to the White House, likely due to his own past placement on the watch list. Before we officially conclude, I'd also like to add one final data analysis here that was produced after the report's authorship. Nevertheless, we find it significant to highlight here with the remainder of the report's findings. In order to get a better understanding of this most recent wave of anti-Muslim hate that we have seen in 2023, we decided to compare it to what we consider to be the 2 most recent waves of anti-Muslim hate. Namely, one, former President Trump's announcement of the Muslim ban in December 2015, and his implementation of that ban when he assumed office in January 2017. In a comparison of the total number of complaints that CAIR received in the 3 months following each inciting incident, we found that following the beginning of the Biden-backed genocide in Gaza, we received 3,578 complaints. In the 3 months following the announcement of Trump's Muslim ban, we received 1,098 complaints. And in the 3 months following the implementation of that ban, we received 1,813 complaints. What we can conclude from this data is that not only is this wave that we are witnessing here in response to the Biden-backed genocide in Gaza greater than either of those other waves on their own, but it is also greater than both of them combined. We find this data incredibly concerning and find it important to highlight here as well with our report's findings. And with that, I'd like to conclude our formal presentation, and I will pass it back over to Mr. Corey Saylor.
Greater than both of them combined. I find that stunning. And before we take questions, behind every one of these numbers is a human being. And it's important to remember that. We had already spoke about the boy in Chicago who had just turned 6 when he was murdered while his landlord allegedly yelled anti-Muslim slurs. Another incident that stands out to me, in Georgia, a student criticized her teacher's Israeli flag, and he turned around and threatened to cut her head off. These are children. What kind of hate do you have to have in you to threaten children? The last one that stands out to me, we had a gentleman in Maryland who makes a regular donation to a mosque in Ohio. And he went to make his regular donation through PayPal, and that donation was reportedly held up due to the ongoing crisis in Israel. So Americans transferring money domestically facing banking consequences. So as we talk about these numbers, every one of these is a human experience, and it all points to one very simple conclusion. Islamophobia is baked into American society. It had to exist in the US prior to October, because what October shows us is a switch was flipped and it was back on. We can take questions at this point. Happy to. Please, sir.
Amr Hassan, Jazeera Mubashir, thank you for the presentation. Do you think that the US government, or the state's action, or the lack thereof, has led to the unprecedented rise of anti-Muslim hate? And would you say that this amounts to a level of, maybe a concerning level of state-sponsored violence against Muslims? Some might say that this is state-sponsored aggression against Muslims as well.
Do you want to take that?
I think it's fair to say that the government spokespeople, whether national security spokesperson or State Department or President himself or many members of Congress who have almost blind, unconditional support to the State of Israel, and they treat Israel above the law, excusing Israel, overlooking what Israel does. That has created the environment where violence, anti-Muslim hysteria, and acts take place. And if we want to say, the government directly is behind it, I would say yes, because the government can control the tone, they can control the information, and even the attitude of people. These are leaders, they are seen as role models, they can calibrate and measure what they say, but they have chosen to dehumanize Palestinians, to allow Israel to do all these crimes, green lighting Israel's genocide. And definitely there are people in our society and around the world who pick up these signals from world leaders. We've seen, for example, the massacre in Europe, 5 years ago. The perpetrator of the massacre in New Zealand cited Trump. So yes, world leaders, actions and words matter and impact people's lives, and that's the situation we see it here in the US.
So yeah, to echo that, the government, we asked back in October for President Biden to go to a mosque and just say, these are Americans too, can we please stop? Never got a response from that. And you'll remember that that's what President Bush did, and his precedent resulted in a reduction of anti-Muslim bias. Please.
In your report, you have a distinction between anti-Muslim and anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian complaints, but of course we understand that people tend to conflate those. I was just curious how you collected that data and how you determined, distinguished between them.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's important to recognize that even though being Muslim and being Arab/being Palestinian are not the same thing, Islamophobia and anti-Muslim racism has always been intertwined with anti-Arab racism and anti-Palestinian racism. And for that reason, in this report, we find it important to acknowledge that instances that target Palestinians play on or weaponize anti-Muslim stereotypes and examples in order to villainize Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians across the country.
You had your hand up, thanks.
No, I think you
Oh, my apologies.
Yes,
Sir?
you would have some necessary repetitive comments on different forums in the US that look, this nation was built in fact on this. The Italians had to face discrimination, the Jews, the Irish, the Polish, and you name the nationalities. So let's continue this normal Americana. I mean, how would you answer this kind of speech? It's all over. But this is a normal flow of the American political and social life.
For sure, right. The reality that this nation was built on the back of African American slavery. In the 1850s, you had anti-Catholic hatred that was extremely similar to what you see now. You've already mentioned the type of anti-Semitism that we continue to see as well as hatred for all of those groups I've just mentioned. So the reality in the United States, unquestionably, is that different minorities will be targeted for different reasons. And one of the points that we've been making is that this wave of Islamophobia essentially benefits one group, which is white supremacists and the people who support the Great Replacement theory, which is the idea that people are coming here from overseas to displace the white majority. So there is no way of looking at this data without recognizing the bigotry that has come before it. And at the same time, I would urge everyone to remember that there's no way to look at solutions without recognizing solutions that have been given to us by previous communities, such as the Civil Rights Acts that were passed back in the 60s, that our community relies on every day, but came out of the African American Civil Rights Movement.
One of the questions that many Muslims around the world thinking about coming to America, dealing with America is, so what happens when you are in fact a victim of this? What do you do? So you have CAIR, and then what?
For sure. CAIR, once you file your complaint with CAIR, attorneys will take a look at that complaint. One of two things will happen. They will either decide that there is a case there that they can litigate, or they will decide that there is an issue there, but it may not need litigation, in which case they pass that over to our team, who uses traditional advocacy methods to help people get justice. So the point of that is there's organization like CAIR that has a national infrastructure that if you face discrimination, there are people there to serve you. The one key thing that I want to point out to that, our colleagues at UC Berkeley's Othering and Belonging Center did a study a couple of years back where they surveyed Muslims. And one of the questions that they asked was, if you are a victim of a hate crime, have you reported it? And 85% of them said that they had not. UC Berkeley gave two reasons for that. One, people don't know where to complain to. We go out and we try to make sure that people know they can complain to us. Two, they're uncomfortable with law enforcement, and that's welcome to the last 20 years of targeting of our community by many elements of law enforcement. We would add a third. And the third is, unfortunately, our community has become desensitized to it. So I will often go to mosques and they'll tell me something like, yeah, we had a guy call in and he said he was going to blow us up. And I'll be like, well, what did you do with it? And the guy will be like, I hit delete, because we get those all the time. And like that acceptance that something like that is normal, I think should just trouble anybody who's listening to this conversation right now.
This 85% still continues as a trend.
That was their data in 2020, I believe they published it. So, yes, ma'am.
I guess just to follow up, then would you say by that count, 85% would not report it? Does that mean that the numbers we're seeing are actually on the lower side of the estimate?
There is no part of us that does not doubt that these are low numbers. And if you look at our recommendations, one of those things that we have been calling for years is for the federal government to attach federal money going to local law enforcement to the reporting of hate crimes data, because it's vastly underreported. So there's no way you can get a scope of the picture and how to deal with the picture if you don't know the numbers. That said, right, we as a institution are collecting and doing our best to make sure that what we're seeing is reflected in what we report to you all.
So these are probably the most extreme cases because folks felt they had to report it.
I think without a doubt, it's a combination of people knew where to report something, and people had the confidence in us to reach out and take care of them. I don't know if they're always the most extreme ones, because there are states. One thing that we've always recognized is where we have a presence, people are more likely to report it to us, right? So in California, for offices, people are more likely to see that. South Dakota, people will still know us, but not to the same extent, right?
We're
Looks like
curious about
we-
the numbers and how
Okay,
the
yeah,
numbers are so high.
Hang on one second, let me.
Yeah, yeah,
Not dominating.
yeah. I agree with Corey's analysis. I believe that the underreporting of the cases to the CAIR is really a natural phenomenon for any minority that feels unheard or does not have trust in law enforcement. For example, when it comes to hate crimes or attacks, physical attacks and threats against the Muslim community, there is always a reluctance to engage law enforcement because they don't trust law enforcement. We have seen many cases that if people contact the FBI or local law enforcement, they see that the government is interested in turning them to become spies. Or they will, the government will take from them more than it gives them back in terms of protection. Secondly, although CAIR is known to the community, CAIR is not known to some segments in the community, especially where we do not have CAIR offices and representations. And thirdly, some people are discouraged that maybe they have not seen that all these cases that even we receive, that we have the capacity to deal with them. And people talk about this. What's the point in calling and reporting if I don't get a solution? So our response to this is a process. 30 years ago, CAIR was not here. Today we have 35 offices. We still need to create at least 15 more offices, and we have to increase our capacity and even our success rate to instill confidence in the community that it is important not to keep it to yourself. That's not protection. That's isolation. That's self-victimization. So it is a process, and we are going to continue to do our best. And secondly, before I leave the podium, in terms of Islamophobia is different than the experience of many other minorities who suffered and maybe continue to suffer slightly. But Islamophobia is unique because it encompasses the Muslim world experience, both history and geography. And therefore, we feel that there is a deep and sophisticated industry behind Islamophobia in the United States. We have been monitoring and combating Islamophobia. We have deep analysis and understanding of this industry. This industry is linked to the defense industry, to media corporations, to lobbying groups, to pro-Israel groups, to white supremacists. So they have serious interest in conflict, in the colonization of the Muslim world. It is deeply rooted, and we are not giving up. And that's why CAIR, being the most prominent Muslim organization, we try to break it down and be objective, optimistic, because we are showing some successes. And finally, CAIR is about empowering the Muslim community. We try to show them, and we have been succeeding, is that civic engagement, visibility is better than isolation and disengagement. And we have seen even under Trump era, the Muslim community has grown politically, has spread, and hundreds of Muslims ran for office and won. And they have become public servants, and that is a proactive way to deal with Islamophobia and disinfect it.
And on that note, we have to wrap the press conference, so we appreciate everyone being here today. All three of our speakers are available for one-on-ones afterward, if that's of service to you. If you need something in Arabic, obviously go ahead and speak to Nihad. But thank you all very much for being here. We appreciate it. That ends the press conference.